These are Alabama's serial killers. Donald Broadnax, after being found guilty and given a 99-year prison sentence for shooting and killing a friend in Birmingham, Alabama in 1977, he was put on work release in 1996 and went on to kill his wife and her grandchild. In the Elliton Village public housing complex in August 1977, 16-year-old Broadnax and his friend, 19-year-old Gregory Manson, got into a fight. During their altercation, Broadnax pulled out a gun and shot Manson 6 times, causing him to collapse to the ground. Broadnax reloaded after emptying his clip and shot Manson 3 more times before leaving the scene of the crime. He was taken into custody and accused of first-degree murder around 3 months later. He was found guilty the next year and given a 99-year prison term with the possibility of parole. After being granted parole in 1986, Broadnax went back to Birmingham. Over the course of the following 2 years, he made contact with Raymond Godfather Mims, a well-known drug dealer in the area, who let him live in one of his homes. When the authorities finally stormed the property, they took many firearms and detained Broadnax. He was promptly sent back to prison because this was deemed a breach of his parole. He was moved to the Work Release Center in Alexander City after submitting a successful application for a work release program in November 1992. After that, Broadnax was employed by Wellborn Forest Products as a painter, where his boss praised him for being pleasant and well-behaved. Broadnax married Hector Jan Stamps, a 42-year-old lady who frequently visited him in prison sometime around January 1994. He was given permission to leave prison on April 25 in order to report to work at the factory. His wife paid him a visit while he was working there, bringing her 4-year-old grandson, D'Angelo Marquez Stamps. Stamps left the boy in the car and went into the factory, where Broadnax beat her to death with a plank. After the murder, Broadnax took D'Angelo and his white Dodge Aries and drove off, stuffing Jan's body in the trunk. Broadnax then drove to a remote area of Elliton Village, where he dragged D'Angelo out of the car and fatally beat him. Then he parked the car in front of an empty house and shoved the boy's body into the trunk. After that, Broadnax got a ride to the Work Release Center, where he tried to conceal his boots and bloody uniform under his bed. 2 other prisoners discovered the outfit and informed the guards, who took Broadnax into custody right away. He was charged with 2 counts of capital murder after being connected to the double murder. Broadnax is currently on death row, awaiting execution. Raymond Eugene Brown. Shortly after being released on parole for the triple murder of 3 relatives in 1960 at the age of 14, he murdered his live-in girlfriend and her daughter in 1987. With the intention of stealing money to purchase some shoes for himself, Brown broke through an unlocked back door on the late evening of October 1, 1960, into a house occupied by 3 relatives: 31-year-old Aunt Bertha May Martin, 63-year-old grandmother Ethel Ogle, and 82-year-old disabled great-grandmother Evelina Ogle. He found his aunt, who had woken up to look into the noise coming from the kitchen, while he was searching the home. After being discovered, Brown attacked Martin and used the kitchen knife to stab her 123 times. He then went into his grandmother's and great-grandmother's chambers and repeatedly stabbed them until he was certain they were dead in order to remove any possible witnesses. He then slashed the bodies' necks from ear to ear as part of a series of post-mortem procedures. When Brown's mother saw the bodies early in the morning, she called the police right away. Officers found several bloody heel prints during the crime scene investigation, which they assumed belonged to the adolescent. They spoke with several of his classmates, friends, and acquaintances to ascertain his level of involvement, and several of them stated that Brown had informed them that he planned to visit his aunt and had allegedly gone there after soccer practice. As a result, 5 days later, he was arrested in the school gym and brought to the local police station to be questioned. Following his admission of guilt, Brown described the events and specifics of his actions. Additionally, his fingerprints matched those at the location of the crime. He was sentenced to life in prison because at the time, Alabama legislation permitted teenagers to be tried as adults. Brown gained a reputation as a model prisoner by participating in several prisoner rehabilitation programs and studying to become an auto mechanic while he was inside. As a result, he was granted parole in 1973 and went back to Ashland, where he briefly resided at his mother's home. Brown soon relocated to Montgomery, where he rented an apartment and got a job at a nearby auto shop. His lifestyle was significantly impacted by his alcohol addiction, which began in the late 1970s. He would go out and essay local ladies and girls when intoxicated. He attempted to strangle his apartment manager after essaying her in 1980, rendering her unconscious. Brown left the scene thinking she was dead. The woman alerted the police after she regained consciousness, and they quickly captured Brown. He was sent back to prison after violating the terms of his parole, where he spent the following 6 years until receiving another release in June 1986. After being freed, he went back to Montgomery and got a job at another car dealership. Brown met Linda Lamont, a 31-year-old single mother of 2 children, sometime in late 1986. After a brief period of friendship, Brown moved into her flat in the early summer of 1987. He apparently stopped acting aggressively during this time, and both friends and family saw him as an upright citizen. Brown attacked Lamont at their shared residence on the evening of August 9, 1987, stabbing her several times in the chest and private parts before cutting her throat 23 centimeters long. After that, he cut her abdomen open, creating an incision that was 69 centimeters long and ran from her lower neck to the right side of her private area. He then entered her daughter Sheila Smokes' bedroom, where he essayed her and repeatedly stabbed her in the chest, throat, and abdomen, leaving the murder weapon in her body. Sheila Smoke was just 10 years old. Aaron, Lamont's 6-year-old son, who was in the same house at the time of the murders, was unharmed. When he was done, Brown used the Polaroid camera to take a picture of Lamont's body and pinned it to the room's TV screen. He then scattered playing cards over the bodies and left a piece of paper with the names of his victims and the word "me" inscribed on it. The bodies and Aaron were discovered in Lamont's home by her parents after she failed to show up for work and her kids for school. When Lamont's ex-husband David was questioned by police during the investigation, he informed them that Brown was at the house when he brought Aaron over. Brown was placed on a wanted list based on his testimony, as well as evidence found at the crime site that suggested he was guilty. He was sentenced to death on May 13, 1988. He waited to be executed for 20 years, and that never happened. In 2008, he died while on death row. Nanny Doss. Between 1927 and 1954, she caused the deaths of 11 people. Doss was also known as Lady Bluebeard, the Black Widow, the Lonely Hearts Killer, and the Giggling Granny. It was discovered that she had murdered a mother-in-law, 2 grandchildren, one of her sisters, 4 husbands, and 2 children. Nanny was born on November 4, 1905. She had 3 sisters and 1 brother. James, Nanny's father, was an aggressive and domineering husband and parent, and both her mother and Nanny detested him. Nanny's academic performance suffered as a result of James' refusal to allow his children to attend school and instead forcing them to work on the family farm. Nanny was 7 years old when the train suddenly halted and she struck her head on a metal bar on the seat in front of her while traveling with her family to see relatives in southern Alabama. She experienced terrible depression, blackouts, and migraines for years following that. She attributed the accident on these and her mental instability. Growing up, she loved to read her mother's romance magazines and fantasize about her own romantic destiny. The column on Lonely Hearts was also her favorite feature. Because he thought it would keep them safe, Nanny's father prohibited his daughters from wearing makeup and fancy clothes. He also forbade them from attending social gatherings like dances. Charlie Braggs, Nanny's co-worker in a linen mill, was her first husband when she was 16 years old. After 4 months of courtship, they were married with her father's blessing. Being the only child of a single mother, Braggs insisted on staying with him after he got married. Nanny's activities were restricted and Braggs' mother occupied a lot of his time. From 1923 until 1927, the marriage produced 4 daughters. Nanny's casual smoking habit turned into a serious addiction, and she began drinking as a result of her stress. Infidelity was rightly suspected by both unhappy partners, and Braggs frequently went missing for days at a time. Due to suspected food poisoning, the couple lost both of their middle girls in 1927. Shortly after, Braggs left infant Florine behind and grabbed Melvina, their firstborn daughter, and left. Nanny got a job at a cotton mill to support herself and Florine after Braggs's mother passed away not long after. In the summer of 1928, Braggs returned with Melvina and another woman that brought her own child along. After a fast divorce, Nanny returned to her mother's house with their 2 daughters. Braggs said he had to divorce her because he was terrified of her. Robert Franklin Harrelson was her second husband. In 1929, they were married pretty soon after meeting. They shared a Jacksonville home with Melvina and Florine. She learned after a few months that he had a criminal history of assault and was an alcoholic. The marriage lasted for 16 years. In 1943, Melvina gave birth to Robert Lee Haynes. A second kid was born 2 years later, but he passed away shortly after. Tired from giving birth and dazed from ether, Melvina believes she saw her visiting mother insert a hat pin into the infant's head. She questioned her sister and husband about it, and they remembered that she was indeed holding a pin. They said that Nanny had informed them the baby was dead. The doctors, however, were unable to provide an adequate reason for why the infant didn't make it. After grieving parents drifted apart, Melvina began dating a soldier. Melvina's son Robert died inexplicably in Nanny's care on July 7, 1945, while she was visiting her father following a particularly ugly argument with her mother. Nanny disapproved of the soldier Melvina was seeing. Nanny collected the $500 life insurance she had purchased on Robert 2 months after the death that was determined to be suffocation from unidentified causes. Harrelson essayed Nanny in 1945. She laced Harrelson's corn whiskey jug with rat poison the following day, and he passed away that same evening. While traveling in Lexington, North Carolina, Nanny met her third husband, Arlie Lanning, through another Lonely Hearts column. 3 days later, they were married. Lanning was an alcoholic womanizer, same as Harrelson, but in this marriage, Nanny was the one who frequently vanished for months at a time. However, she portrayed herself as a devoted housewife when she was at home, and the town's residents helped her attend his funeral after he passed away from what was allegedly heart failure. After Lanning's mother passed away in her sleep, Nanny took the insurance money and promptly banked it. She then fled North Carolina and ended up at her sister's Dovie's house. Dovie was bedridden and passed away shortly after Nanny arrived. Nanny joined the Diamond Circle Club dating service in search of another husband, and she quickly met Richard L. Morton of Jamestown, North Carolina. In 1952, they tied the knot in Emporia, Kansas. He was unfaithful but did not have a drinking problem. When she moved in with them in January 1953, she poisoned her mother, Louisa, then she poisoned him. On May 19, 1953, 3 months later, Morton passed away. In June 1953, Nanny wed Samuel Doss from Tulsa, Oklahoma. In Carroll County, Arkansas, Doss, a Nazarene minister, lost his family in a tornado. Nanny loved romantic novels and stories, which Samuel criticized of. He was hospitalized in September due to flu-like symptoms. A serious digestive tract infection was identified by the hospital. On October 5, he received treatment and was sent home. In 1954, Samuel passed away on October 12. That night, in her haste to get the 2 life insurance policies she had purchased on him, Nanny killed him. His doctor became aware of this unexpected death and requested an autopsy. He had a significant level of arsenic in his system. Nanny was taken into custody right away. Doss admitted to killing her mother, sister, grandchild, mother-in-law, and 4 of her husbands. Samuel Doss was the only focus of the Oklahoma State's case. J. Howard Edmondson, who went on to become the governor of Oklahoma, was the prosecutor of Nanny Doss. On May 17, 1955, she entered the guilty plea and was given a life sentence. Because she was a woman, the state chose not to pursue the capital penalty. She was never charged with the other deaths. In 1965, she passed away in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary sick unit from leukemia. Ronda Bell Martin. She was a family annihilator who was put to death by the state of Alabama for killing her fourth husband, Claude Carroll Martin, in 1951. She was charged of poisoning and killing her own mother and 5 of her 7 children, all of whom were under the age of 12 when they perished, using rat poison as her means of murder. Ronald Martin, her 5th husband and former stepson, was the only one of her victims known to have survived. She eventually denied her involvement in the killings of 2 of her children, despite having at first admitted to all of the killings she was charged with. James Robert and Mary Frances Tomley were the parents of Ronda Bell Tomley, who was born in Alabama in 1907. She was a waitress before she was arrested. She admitted to poisoning her mother, 2 husbands, and 3 of her children in March 1956. She denied murdering any other children. She enjoyed receiving the Get Well sympathy cards that were sent after the victims passed away. She made sure they were buried in a private plot side by side. Ronald Martin, her 5th spouse and the son of Claude Carroll Martin, was poisoned like the others. He was once her stepson. He survived but became paraplegic. Authorities began investigating Martin's unusual deaths because of his medical condition. Prosecutors claimed that she went on a murdering rampage because she was collecting insurance payments, but this is implausible because she only received enough to pay for funeral expenses, and she never admitted to this anyway. In March 1956, Martin was taken into custody. Prison officials typically kept her scheduled execution dates a secret from her until they were very close because of her heart problems. During Martin's 2-hour clemency hearing the day before her execution, her defense lawyer made an unsuccessful bid to halt the execution on the grounds that Martin's sanity had not been sufficiently examined. She remained in the Jefferson County Jail until late May 1957, when she was moved to Kilby Prison, home of Alabama's electric chair, because her execution was scheduled for May 31. She was transferred to the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women after the execution date was rescheduled. She remained there until about 4 hours prior to her execution, at which point she was returned to Kilby Prison. Martin's final meal was a cheeseburger, mashed potatoes, cinnamon buns, and coffee 7 hours before she was put to death. With a Bible in her hand, Martin was escorted to Alabama's electric chair on October 11, 1957. At her execution, she reportedly recited the 23rd Psalm with the prison chaplain while remaining composed and silently crying. She refused to say any last words. Martin's execution had a minor incident before she was shocked for the first time because her executioners threw the switch that turned on the power before the electrodes were prepared. Before authorities could carry out Martin's execution, she had to wait a few minutes for the electric cycle to be completed. Martin had stated in 1956 that she wanted her remains transported to an unnamed scientific institution for autopsy so that researchers may examine her and determine the reason behind her acts. Prison officials discovered a note expressing a similar sentiment after she was executed. Her body was given to family members in a Montgomery funeral home following her execution. Shawn Patrick Gobble. He is known as the Interstate Killer. Between 1994 and 1995, Gobble, a former truck driver, abducted and killed at least 4 women in the southern United States. Authorities in 10 additional states have looked at him for multiple unsolved female homicides since his arrest. Even though he was cleared in a few of those cases, it is still unknown how many victims he actually had. Gobble, the son of Kenneth and Irma Gobble, was born in Asheboro, North Carolina, on November 1, 1966. His family relocated to Illinois. His father essayed a 10-year-old girl during a house invasion in Rockford when he was 6 years old, marking the first significant event in his life. At the time of the attack, young Shawn was seated outside the crime scene in his father's car. Kenneth was found guilty of the offense and given a prison term ranging from 4 to 20 years. After 4 years, he was set free. Shawn remained in Rockford with his mother and sister, where he went to Auburn High School. He left school during his senior year in 1984. When his father, who was now residing in New Mexico, was accused of essaying a 6-year-old girl, 2 years later, he was sent back to prison and eventually released again in 1994. Shawn Gobble enlisted in the military, married, and had a son. Following the dissolution of his marriage, Shawn relocated to North Carolina in 1988 and started driving trucks in 1991. Gobble, who was 6'3" and 225 pounds, referred to himself as a ladies' man. Lisa Susan O'Rourke was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and was 29 years old when Gobble picked her up in Louisiana, or Mississippi, in January 1994 along Interstate 10. Before he strangled her to death and dumped her body beneath a bridge on Interstate 65 in Alabama, he also essayed her. Her death was first deemed hypothermia, but was later determined to be murder after her body was discovered on January 23. The authorities were able to identify her 4 months later by her fingerprints. The second victim was 45-year-old Brenda K. Hagee. She was a native of Bloomington, Indiana, and had previously been charged with trespassing into truck stops, which were popular places for prostitution in her home state. As a wanderer, she strolled about the east side of the country a lot. On January 22, 1995, she spent time at a homeless shelter in Gainesville, Florida. She traveled to Tennessee the following day, where she was kidnapped by Gobble at a service station. Gobble then essayed her and strangled her to death, breaking her neck in the process. Later, he abandoned her body on an access road to Interstate 81 in Bristol, Virginia. While he was driving away, he ran over her legs. Later that day, the body was discovered. Police launched an investigation after receiving multiple reports, the most promising of which came from a truck driver who claimed to have seen a semi stopped along the same access road hours before the woman's body was discovered. 34-year-old Sherry Tew Manser had been arrested for prostitution between 1982 and 1994. On January 31, 1995, while visiting her sister in Bowie, Maryland, she was last seen alive by her loved ones. She and her 2-year-old niece left the house. The next morning, the little girl was found in Washington, D.C. Gobble picked up Manser in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He claims that before he made the decision to strangle her to death, they had relations. Her body was discovered on February 19 after he disposed of it beside Interstate 40. She was only known as Jane Doe for the following few months because her identity could not be definitively established when it was discovered. 36-year-old Alice Rebecca Haynes was from Columbus, Ohio. She had already been found guilty of prostitution. She made her final call from a truck stop on Interstate 70 in Salina, Kansas, just before she passed away. She then hitched a ride to Tennessee, where Gobble abducted her at a gas station and killed her by suffocating her. He disposed of her body in Virginia along Interstate 81. The fingerprint of Hagee's killer was found in a plastic bag that was left at the scene of her death. It was entered into a database, and when it matched the print acquired from Gobble in September 1994 following an arrest for many offenses, investigators finally received a hit. He was then taken into custody in front of Rocky Road Express, the trucking company he was then employed at in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His truck was the subject of a search warrant. Police discovered Haynes's pocketbook inside of it. They also confiscated women's underwear, travel bags, and vulgar magazines. During an interrogation, Gobble acknowledged that he had slain a lady in North Carolina and confessed to both crimes. He was charged of killing the woman after it was revealed that she was Manser. Gobble was probed for murders in many other states in addition to Tennessee and North Carolina. He was under investigation for the 1992 murder of Evesham, New Jersey resident Tammy Zwicky the day after his arrest. Gobble was briefly under investigation as a possible suspect in the serial killer Dr. No's case. Because Gobble was still in high school and then in the service when some of the earlier homicides occurred, he was later exonerated of any wrongdoing in those incidents. Several Jane Does were discovered on highways between 1987 and 1995. Marcia Matthews was murdered in 1985, Shirley Dean Taylor was murdered in 1986, April Barnett was murdered in 1986, Anna Patterson was murdered in 1987, Catherine Hill, also known as Wendy Turner, was murdered in 1990, Cheryl Mason was murdered in 1991, Margaret Goines was murdered in 1995. Gobble was investigated for all of these. He is serving multiple life sentences. Walter Hill. He killed 5 people between 1952 and 1977. In Adamsville, Alabama, in 1952, 17-year-old Hill killed a man named Sam Atmore by beating him with a board. He was given a 10-year prison term after entering a guilty plea to second-degree murder. Hill was transferred to the prison farm at Atmore State. He broke out of jail just prior to his transfer, but he was apprehended shortly after. During a prison baseball game in 1954, Hill was one of 20 prisoners who broke out of Atmore Prison Farm. Directly beneath Henry Sawyers, a dozing tower guard, the man sliced through a barrier. Sawyers confessed that he fell asleep, so he was fired immediately. Other guards were also suspended. Hill and 16 other prisoners were apprehended in less than a day. In 1961, Hill was freed from prison. After that, he joined the Jamaican army, but after 9 months he was dishonorably dismissed. Hill and another man drove across state lines to Alabama in 1962 after kidnapping Arthur Phillips at gunpoint. Then they drove away after ejecting Phillips. Hill was found guilty in federal court of kidnapping and interstate trafficking of a stolen car. He received a 25-year prison sentence. He killed a fellow prisoner by stabbing him while he was incarcerated in the United States Penitentiary in Atlanta. He received a 5-year sentence extension after being found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. In 1975, Hill was granted parole. He was at the residence of 60-year-old Willie Mae Hammock, her daughter 34-year-old Lois Jean Tatum, and Lois's husband 36-year-old John Tatum Jr. on January 7, 1977. Willie had a 16-year-old adoptive son named Robert and a 13-year-old stepdaughter named Toni. Hill, who had been dating Toni, asked Willie Hammock if he could marry her. Refusing, Willie Mae proceeded to the front bedroom closet. Hill shot her dead after pursuing her. After shooting John twice in the dining room, he followed Lois around the house and shot her as well. After that, Hill instructed Toni, who had seen the killings, to get dressed and leave with him. Hill made Robert drive them to Georgia after the two discovered him at a friend's house. The car broke down when they got to Villa Rica, Georgia, and Robert was able to run. When he returned to Alabama via hitchhiking, he discovered the bodies. While strolling around Decatur, Georgia, Hill and Toni came upon a man named Louis Nunnery. Nunnery agreed to help when the two told him about their car. Hill gave Nunnery the order to take the 3 of them to South Carolina once they had gotten into his vehicle. He told him that he killed 3 individuals and that he will kill anyone who attempted to stop him. In North Carolina, his vehicle broke down. Nunnery ran away and reported Hill to the police. The gun that Hill used to carry out the killings was discovered in his pocket by the police, who promptly captured him. Hill was sentenced to death. On May 2, 1997, he was put to death in the electric chair at Holman Correctional Facility. He passed away surrounded by 2 of his nieces and his wife, Irma Hill. His final meal was sweet potatoes and fried chicken. He had no last words. None of Hill's victims' family members were present when he was executed. Syd Jones. A lot of information about Jones's life is still unknown, including when he was born. Presumably a native of Alabama, he was a member of the 10th Cavalry Regiment at one time. He is accused of shooting and killing W.S. Mosley, a deputy sheriff, while he was assigned to Monterey, California. Jones was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. He was then sentenced to death for the murder of another prisoner, most likely Cleve Waters. He confessed to 13 killings and named his victims in a note he left in his cell on the day of his execution, June 25, 1915. He mentioned he committed his first murder in 1907. Daniel Lee Siebert. He confessed to at least 5 murders and was found guilty of 3. He admitted to being the cause of at least 12 deaths when questioned. The first known murder committed by Siebert was in Las Vegas, Nevada. He was found guilty of manslaughter. Siebert was charged with killing 2 women in Los Angeles, California in 1985. He killed a student and her 2 kids at the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind in 1986. The school was concerned that Sherry Weathers had not been in touch with them after more than a week-long absence from courses. Police discovered her dead body and the bodies of her 2 children during a search of her flat. Another student who had vanished from the institute was also discovered during investigation. Linda Jarman was killed and discovered dead in her apartment. In addition, he was accused of killing the waitress he had been seeing, Linda Odom. Her remains were found in March after she was reported missing in February. Siebert was linked to her car by fingerprints. Authorities thought Siebert was also responsible for the death of Cheryl Evans, whose body was discovered at about the same time in Calhoun County, Alabama. Siebert was accused of Beatrice McDougall's 1986 death in Atlantic City, New Jersey. While he was in prison, he confessed to have killed at least 12 people. Police were informed that an art teacher named Daniel Spence had an interest in Sherry Weathers, and he was questioned in relation to the crime. Spence was identified by a fingerprint check as Daniel Siebert, who was wanted in San Francisco on assault charges and had a 1979 manslaughter conviction. Siebert was on the run for the next 6 months. After calling a friend who reported him to the police, he was caught in Hurricane Mills, Tennessee. When he arrived for work the next day, he was detained. In the capital cases involving Germain and Weathers and her children, Siebert was found guilty. For the killings of Weathers and her children, he was scheduled to be executed on October 25, 2007. At the time, Siebert was receiving treatment for cancer of the pancreas. Hours before it was scheduled to take place, Siebert's execution was postponed. On April 22, 2008, he passed away from cancer-related problems at Holman Prison, which is close to Atmore, Alabama. Thomas Whisenhant. Between 1963 and 1976, he killed at least 4 women in Mobile County, Alabama. The last of Willie and Emma Whisenhant's 4 children, he was born in Pritchard, Alabama on January 29, 1947. His mother, a controlling woman who would frequently argue with and assault her physically weak and drunken husband, was the head of his low-income household. She also urged her children to follow in her footsteps. These fights frequently happened when Whisenhant's father tried to impress his wife, who consistently turned him down because he was intoxicated on moonshine. She supported Whisenhant, whom she was overly protective of, and saved her rage and hatred for her husband. Up until the age of 7, Whisenhant was forced to share a bed with his mother. He remained in the same bedroom as her until he was 16, at which point, according to his sister, he had turned angry and gloomy. By the time he reached adolescence, Whisenhant was also always with his mother, who never left his side. A psychologist said that Whisenhant hated her. Lexi Haynes, a 72-year-old widow, was shot and killed in Pritchard on May 6, 1963. The murder weapon was discovered by police in an abandoned area close to Whisenhant's family home. The 16-year-old Whisenhant was suspected right away since he had just been accused of robbing a blind woman. The robbery accusation against Whisenhant was later dismissed on a technicality, according to a retired Pritchard police captain. When Whisenhant was questioned by police regarding the murder, his family gave him an alibi, stating that he was home when the shooting took place. Whisenhant and his companions had been playing with a stolen firearm prior to the shooting. Later, a witness claimed that Whisenhant had drawn a bullet from the handgun, raised it, and declared that someone would soon be killed. Nevertheless, Whisenhant was never tried for Haynes's murder. He became an airman in the U.S. Air Force. On October 25, 1965, Rose Covington, a 22-year-old working in the U.S. Air Force, was attacked by Whisenhant. In the Air Force Base's finance office, he struck her unconscious with a metal ashtray. Covington spent 2 months in the hospital after suffering serious head and face injuries. She testified at his trial that she had never met him and had no idea what he looked like. Despite his repeated denials of the incident, he was found guilty on March 14, 1966, of assault with intent to commit murder and given a 20-year prison sentence with hard labor. In addition, he was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force, forced to forfeit all pay, and had his rank lowered. After serving the first part of his sentence in Fort Carson, Whisenhant was moved to an unnamed federal prison to finish out his term. He was given release on November 28, 1973, after his sentence was lowered to 10 years in 1970. Patricia Hitt, a 28-year-old mother of 2 who worked in a convenience store in Mobile County, Alabama, was attacked by Whisenhant on November 21, 1975. After approaching her and beating her, Whisenhant shot her in the head. For this crime, 2 other males were first taken into custody. Whisenhant abducted and killed Venora Hyatt, a 44-year-old female convenience store employee in Mobile, on April 16, 1976. Hyatt was abducted from the convenience shop and brought to an old house covered in kudzu vines. Whisenhant killed Hyatt and left her body next to an abandoned cottage. He went back to the crime scene the next day and mutilated her body. After that, he stole her wristwatch, which he subsequently presented as a gift to his wife. 23-year-old Cheryl Lynn Payton, a convenience store clerk at a compact store in Mobile County, was kidnapped by Whisenhant on October 16, 1976. She was taken at gunpoint by Whisenhant, who then drove her to a secluded forested area where he essayed her in the front seat of his pickup truck. He then shot her in the head, killing her. Before running away, he carried her body into the neighboring woods. Whisenhant returned to the scene of the crime on October 17 and mutilated Payton's body. He slashed her abdomen and severed a significant portion of her breast. Nevertheless, he was apprehended by police following a pursuit after being seen close to the crime site. He confessed to all of his crimes in detail when being questioned. In addition to confessing to killing Payton and deforming her body, he also acknowledged killing Hilt and Hyatt in the preceding months. He then acknowledged killing Haynes while he was a teenager. In addition, Whisenhant admitted to assaulting Covington and assaulting his wife, as well as 2 other women, but he did say that Payton was the only person he had essayed. In the Mobile region, Whisenhant's murders attracted notice and media coverage. His trial was therefore relocated to Birmingham. His trial for Payton's murder started on August 1, 1977. Whisenhant entered a not guilty plea by reason of insanity. The jury convicted him of capital murder on August 9. He was given a death sentence on September 7. 26-year-old Kenneth Lynn Curry, the son of Verona Hyatt, abducted and robbed a car driver in September 1977. He said he only did that to get to the same prison where Whisenhant was held so that he can get revenge on what he did to his mother. After more than 30 years of evading execution because of successful appeals and prosecution negligence, Whisenhant was finally set to be executed on May 27, 2010 by lethal injection. He had coffee, chocolate pudding, orange drink, American cheese, French fries, and chicken leg quarters for his last meal. He refused to say any last words. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.